Welcome to Lead for Good, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. This is a show where the audience will meet and get to know top nonprofit leaders. Together, we will take a deep dive into nonprofit leadership, endeavoring to uncover and unpack the most important characteristics, traits, strategies, and actions of successful nonprofit leaders. Through this journey together, we desire to help you, the nonprofit leader, grow your knowledge and capabilities to lead for good. We want you to achieve your full potential as leaders in the sector. So, welcome to the conversation. We're glad you joined us today. Without further delay, let's join our host, Chris Looney, as he interviews yet another extraordinary leader who is truly leading for good. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lead for Good, where we explore the insights, lessons, and lived experiences of extraordinary nonprofit leaders who are working every day to make our world a better place. Today, we welcome Christy Ward, CEO of Share Ourselves, an organization that has long been a trusted resource and partner for families and individuals across Orange County. Christy is widely known for her thoughtful and people-centered approach to leadership, and she has a gift for seeing potential in others, understanding how to develop staff at all levels, and creating environments where people can grow with intention and confidence. And one of Christy's strongest leadership beliefs is that people can do extraordinary things when they're given meaningful feedback, support, and the chance to stretch in their own potential. She also understands that leadership sometimes requires helping staff discover where they fit best, including situations where the role they imagine for themselves may not be the role where they can thrive. Her approach is grounded in compassion, clarity, and a deep commitment to organizational and individual growth. This is such an important topic for nonprofit leaders, and I'm thrilled we get to learn from Christy today. So, Christy, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you ask to have me here today and speaking about something that I'm really passionate about. So thank you.
Yeah, well, the honor is mine. We've known each other for a long time. I've always admired your leadership of Share Ourselves and have wanted to have this conversation for a long time. And here we are, episode 23. So let's get underway. But before we kind of tackle the main topic, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about your background and what shaped you as a leader. So, can you share a little bit about your leadership journey and what led you to your role as CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my background is as a nurse. I'm from Portland, Oregon, so really kind of started my career there in a private, commercial-based family medicine practice, working as a nurse, and then I had the opportunity to move to Oregon Health and Science University, which is the academic medical facility basically in Portland, and started working as a nurse. And then it was just like through that process, I had the opportunity to I wanted to be involved more and be able to make a bigger impact. And so
Yeah.
I had these progressive opportunities to move into leadership roles. And after about 17 years, then I had the chance to go work for Multnomah County Health Department and run their clinical organization, which for organizations like ours, which are federally qualified health center, it was actually the largest in the state. I
Wow.
ran 23 FQHCs and in a director role. And then for a variety of different reasons, somebody said, "Hey, there's this opportunity for a CEO position in Sacramento. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll throw my hat in the ring," not really thinking that I'd be selected, and I was. I was there for about 4 years and knew that Sacramento wasn't going to be my home, and had a couple opportunities, Orange County, here being one. And honestly, I came down here, visited the organization, got to see the amazing things that they do, and met the board of directors who are just like, it's such a mission-driven organization, and it's at all levels. And I was like, I have to be here. And so when I was thankfully offered the job, I like without hesitation picked up and here I am now 6 years later. So going on 7.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
For all those people out there that don't know, when you are a leader of an FQHC organization, the board looks a little bit different. There are actual client representatives on the board mandated by law, which is fascinating and a little bit different. Most nonprofit leaders out there have never had to kind of experience that.
Yeah, it is a requirement that 51% or greater of our board has to be represented by the people that we serve. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that their voice is critically important in all that we do.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to kind of talk through that. That would be an entirely different podcast. But so few people out there understand that there are organizations like yours that have a much stronger community voice or community represented voice from patients, from clients, so to speak, than most organizations. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, I bet that you were blessed to have mentors along the way in your journey. I'd love to know a little bit about kind of not necessarily the names of the individuals per se, but like who were these individuals in your life and what did they do for you?
Yeah, that's it's something I reflect on a lot because I feel like it has developed me very much. There were some very key people during my time at Oregon Health and Science University or OHSU. And people who opened doors for me, and at the same time provided me a lot of critical developmental feedback about,
Nice.
things that are important as a leader, how to show up and not be afraid to tackle critical conversations or issues.
Right.
There are two people in particular that I think about, and one was someone who had been in a very senior leadership position at OHSU, and at the time I had actually reached out to her to see if she would give me a letter of recommendation.
Hmm.
Because I knew that I was going after something, and she actually paused and said, before I provide you that answer, I want to learn a little bit more about what you are trying, what you want to accomplish and what your goals are. And I was kind of
Right.
moving to a lateral position. And I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was basically like I kind of had like that she was saying, I kind of had you in mind for this really senior leadership position in the organization that I'm in. And what you're missing is like the educational component. You need to have your master's degree, which I did not have at the time.
Right.
And it was like, I didn't know that somebody would ever look at me with the potential
Ah.
to hold a role at that level, which is
Mm.
funny for me to say now being a CEO. But I never envisioned that for myself.
It's amazing.
And it was changing for me. I went back to school, I finished my master's, and it was a catalyst for so much that came. But it was
Right.
through that developmental conversation that was really impactful. And there was one other person who I feel like changed me from being a manager to a leader.
Okay.
And that person talked about how her role was about making herself obsolete. And I didn't understand that. But
Hmm.
what she said is, I shouldn't be the person who's always in the weeds. My role is to help to make sure people have the skills and are growing where they can function without me. And
Hmm.
that was also really pivotal because it's about, again, developing people. And I had not always, but it's a journey to make that transition from being a manager to being a leader.
Yeah. So good. Thanks for sharing that. I got goosebumps
Yeah.
several times in what you shared because opening doors, critical advice, helping you see your own potential. So, so great. Um, Well, as you think now about kind of the philosophy of leadership that you've developed for yourself, and as you lead your organization and just lead so many different people, how would you describe your own leadership philosophy now?
Yeah, I think where I try to focus is like helping people to be able to do their best work.
Okay.
How to, as we're approaching leadership, how do we make sure that we are having critical conversations and crucial conversations, identifying where they may run into barriers or what they're interested, where they feel like they'd like to grow, and being able to have some of those, good conversations to help them move to the next level. I
Yeah.
found that, yeah, oftentimes, like when you find people who have interest, they're going to bring energy with that. And
Mm.
so, getting to know somebody of like what makes them tick. I like to know
Yeah.
people's backstory. And so I feel like the closer I get and like asking them what they're interested in, where they want to grow, where they see themselves growing, provides a little bit of a window to be able to either help them with that, or also it sometimes triggers things that I had no knowledge of, that it's like I had no idea that you're working as a nurse and what you'd really like to go do is case management. And there's a path for that, but that's going to be different, that I wouldn't be thinking about how to develop you or how to, but if we can kind of create that connectedness for people,
Yep. Yep.
they may still want to do nursing, and there's a way to incorporate this into it as well.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's such a great lead in to the conversation, we want to have today. And let's talk a little bit about creating space for growth. What does it look like to create an environment where staff feel they have room to grow and where they can explore their own potential?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's an element of culture that's really critical for that. It can't just be me that is saying we need to,
Mm,
we need to develop people. It needs to be this philosophy at all levels of the organization that this is how we work and how we support our employees. So trying to help do the development of our leaders, who they then are doing the development of staff, is important. And those are just, I think, conversations as we're having doing our annual evaluations, for example, and talking about goals. Some of those discussions then are around, what are you doing to help your staff members also be able to take on new roles or initiatives that there's lots of things that are happening at the ground level that their leader or manager, manager supervisor may be working on, but how do you potentially bring some of your staff in to be helpful? As a manager or a leader, you don't have to be the doer of everything. In fact, it's better if you're not. If you can
yep.
bring people and plug them in and provide them that opportunity to work hip to hip with you or be a support, it again creates, I've seen it create really positive engagement. And I also think that there's an element of retention that happens with that too, because
Right.
people feel like you value what they're bringing forward, and you're again providing those opportunities.
Yeah, no, I love that. How do you approach developmental feedback in a way that feels both supportive and empowering?
Yeah, I think it's something that you're always balancing, right? Because
Yeah,
it's there's your people at all ends of the bell curve. So it's like making sure that even with your high performers, where are the areas they can continue to grow? Because you don't want them to get disappointed or feel like you don't have anything more to offer to help them
right,
grow. So I
right.
think there's always for everyone a bit of an individualized approach, and it needs to be balanced.
Hmm.
I do think that, there's parts of the work that we do where sometimes you're having to deliver um, really constructive feedback or
Yeah.
kind of go down a path of corrective action. I like to approach kind of those conversations more of like the employee and I sitting hip to hip and looking at the problem in front of us, as opposed to you did this. This is what you're
Okay.
doing wrong. Talking about the
Hmm.
problem as its own unique thing, because it's not about this individual. It may be about the behaviors they're exhibiting, but being able to use that in a way that you're trying to support people through the process. And sometimes at the end of the day, um, that goes a certain way. I do also want to, and I think it's really important, is that acknowledging that mistakes also help with growth.
Okay.
And as long as mistakes aren't something really egregious or they're repeated after there's been constructive, opportunities for educational moments, that's what those are. As long as they take that and they can grow and continue to progress through that, we all make
Yeah.
mistakes at times. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're, something that we didn't pay attention to with the level of detail or something, but not using that as something where you're kind of beating somebody up about it, but just kind of
Sure.
saying, what did you learn from that? And how is it going to be different than moving forward?
Yeah, that's good. Well, what habits or practices, in your view, help leaders become more intentional about cultivating growth in their teams?
Yeah, I think about what are but the immediate thing I think of is like, what's the work that I'm doing or that our managers are doing that they really don't need to be doing at the level that they're at? It really
Okay.
is, something that other members of their team can do. And and I found we all struggle with that at times. It's the delegation piece, right? And
Sure.
so how do we use those as opportunities on a consistent basis to try to allow opportunities for other folks. Um, Oftentimes, I think that when you think of who the people are in your organization, who are the go-to people, those are the ones that you probably could be developing more if you haven't already identified them as someone. The other one of the other habits that I like to have is uh, whenever there's a promotional opportunity within our organization, I always like to open that up to everyone in the organization. And the reason I do that, and of course, you may have someone in mind that you want to put into that position. But by
Right.
opening up the opportunity for everyone, sometimes people throw their hat in that you don't expect. They're oftentimes the people who are not always, the outspoken ones or waving their hand in the air. But sometimes there are people that will come forward that you just didn't know that they have an interest in growing in a leadership role or in other ways. And it provides that opportunity. I feel like they open the door for us to be able to provide them feedback then
You're
about
right.
you're ready for this, or here's, I didn't know, and I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to understand that you have interest in that. Here's the things that we can do to help kind of create the path for you to be able to be ready for that next opportunity.
Mhm. So good. Yeah. It is interesting how often you see organizations that don't make available those promotional opportunities for fear that it might negatively impact someone who doesn't get the
Yep.
job, right?
Yep.
And that fear is not healthy because it might be a conversation that you have where it forces some discomfort on your part,
Yep.
but
Yep.
at least you know what's out there as opposed to pretending it doesn't exist, even though it's totally there under the surface and manifesting itself in more negative ways with probably chatter and backtalk and behind the scenes stuff, right? So I love the idea of just bringing to the surface the opportunity for people, the conversation that you need to have with people, and finding new potential leaders out of it as well.
Yeah, I think about most of us got into our positions through some kind of path that wasn't completely straightforward. We didn't get every position that
Yeah.
we were going after. And
Right.
along the way, we likely also got feedback that allowed us to have these milestone kind of places to get to a different spot. And what a gift and opportunity we have to be able to help somebody along that journey.
Yep.
And so the other thing that I would say is that on the flip side, sometimes you have staff who have been placed into positions because of legacy and not because they necessarily had the skill set and were ready for that
Sure. Yeah.
jump. So, I think that it's a little bit of a cautionary tale to like make sure that we're also being objective. Sometimes, we like somebody and they work so hard and we put them into this new position that they're really not ready for. It's a stretch and they don't succeed. And so I like to make sure that we avoid those situations too. And, right. I mean, it's a similar challenge, but different problem.
Well, that's exactly the topic I wanted to tackle, which is this proverbial helping people find the right seat on the bus. And you
Yeah.
talk about this, and how do you identify when someone is in the right seat versus when they might thrive somewhere else?
Yeah, I feel like that's so unique and there are so many different situations that have come up. I think it, oftentimes you get that sense from an employee of how if they're in the right seat, they're thriving, right? Things
Right.
are they're stressed in the work in a good way. We all have stress in our work, and so it's like,
Yeah.
but it's something that's motivating them, and you can feel it. It's palpable when they're thriving in the role that they're in. Um, for folks who are not in the right seat on the bus, those are the ones where there are a lot of mistakes that are happening. They're sometimes kind of snippy or defensive. I have had different iterations too of folks who are just really making a lot of mistakes and also don't have that awareness, or they're raising that awareness. And so those are the more challenging conversations, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to help people understand and walk them through the areas in the most direct and objective way that you can do it, approaching it with kindness, but also being really transparent and honest about how they are or aren't doing. When we get through a process, if there ultimately is somebody who is just not in the right position, I sit
Yeah.
down and really have that conversation with them
Okay.
about, let's talk about how to help you find another fit. And it's not, it may be something in the organization or something not in the organization. And like kind of just with bringing compassion with that of, you know, everybody wants people to be successful. And the interesting thing is sometimes when you get somebody to that place, there's it's like 50% of the time. It's not all the time, but sometimes
Yes.
people are like really relieved because it's like
Right.
they've been like the load, you can just see it physically. They're just relieved that because they, sometimes feel very trapped that they can't do anything. And so I've done things like providing people some work time where they can be applying for other positions, or, helping them
Mm,
do some shadowing in our organization in another role to see if that's something of interest, if that's available. So
amazing.
just kind of trying to meet people where they're at. But at the end of the day, I always think about, as a leader, everybody is watching what you're going to do and how you're going to manage a situation. And if you have someone who's in the wrong seat and the rest of the team is, kind of holding up the caboose, trying to
Yeah.
keep them, everybody's watching how you're managing that. And
Yep.
if you're not addressing things, that can really be a demotivator for the team as well. So I think it's just kind of having that awareness as a leader of what's going on, beyond you not wanting to have this singular conversation with this individual who's really struggling. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Yeah.
of course, and it obviously requires a leader to have some courageous conversations with people they would much prefer not to have, or to sweep under the rug or avoid. I mean, it's
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of documentation and preparation, and
Yep.
the fallout of having hurt feelings and all of those things. But it's the price of leadership in a way, right? And the 50% who make it easy is nice, but to your point,
Yeah.
there's 50% who are
Yeah.
going to make it very difficult, no matter what you say and how you approach it. And the reality is that for many of those 50%, the likelihood of them needing to find another organization is probably very real.
Yeah, and there are folks that many that I know who have made that leap. It's not like that happens all the time, but who have then moved on to another organization and really found a position where they are doing incredibly well. And yeah,
Well, and your job as a leader is to be encouraging with that perspective. I'm sure it's
yeah,
like it's not entirely you, right? It's this role, it's this organization. It might be just this leadership position, this position in general. I'm very confident that you're going to find the role and the organization, the position that's going to help you thrive,
right,
and
right,
and I want to help you get there.
yeah. And
And you're
it's yeah, as we are interviewing people and looking at resumes, and you think that you have somebody who has the right fit and right skill set, but we also each are have unique organizations with its own culture and skill set that's required, and sometimes those things just don't connect. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just kind of how that sometimes that how that falls out.
Yeah, yeah. I find it interesting, just switching subjects a little bit, that there are staff that have the capacity to grow. They would be extraordinary in any role, and you want them to be leaders or to grow with greater responsibility and whatnot. Yet they are hesitant or fearful of change, or don't want to take on that additional responsibility. What do you do in those situations? Do you always push for it, or do you allow them to kind of just do their thing?
Yeah, I think that it's a conversation, right? Of like trying to understand what the hesitancy is in those
Good.
scenarios.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who just are worried about change, particularly if there's an elevated role. Sometimes there's concern about how that's going to change their relationships with the other people that they work with their team members. And that's a
Sure.
really justifiable reason for them to have concerns at times. Some people don't want the added responsibility. They kind of are happy in the work that they're
Hmm.
doing and they do
Sure.
a great job. We have a couple people like that who are just very content in the roles that they're at. And we know that they have capacity, the capability. But if they also aren't completely on board, we don't want to move them into something they're not ready for. I think sometimes us being able to come forward and say, hey, I really see this potential in you. And if you have interest in it, then let's talk about how we can help you get to that place. And that conversation, I feel, is probably the most telling to help people understand if they're either going to lean in or open the door a little bit and they want to learn more, or it's kind of like, but at least you put it out there. So even a year down the road,
Right,
if they have
right.
that interest, you've been able to kind of start the conversation.
Good, 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 good. Yeah. And what do leaders often misunderstand about staff development, and what would you want them to maybe do differently?
Yeah, I really feel like developing staff for me helps me continue to grow as a leader. It's not a one size fits all, and being able to continue to work with people, and also, at my level now too, I'm mentoring people to be mentoring people, and so that also
Hmm.
feels really good. Um, I think also knowing that you don't have to be the holder of all information. Like for me, each of my leaders on my team brings a unique skill set and a lens. And on my team, like that I lead, I want them to be my consultants. I want them bringing forward. And
Nice.
so, like, not thinking about, I have somebody in compliance, and whenever there's something that's related to compliance, I'm looking at her saying, tell me how you'd be approaching this.
Yeah.
So, I think that not everybody kind of thinks that way, but I think that that makes me stronger, and it also helps me to better lead the team, but by having people who are the experts, and that it's not always me who is the content expert.
Yeah.
Um, I also try to be really reflective. If something didn't go right, or even when some things do, I try to really think about, that situation. Um, And then beyond that, I think always just making sure that people know, I want people to know me as a person. So, it's not like, oh, Christy is, walking through the building. I want people to be like, hey, how are you doing? And, how's your dog? Just being like a a person with my team members. That's really important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know there are organizations that send out the alert when the boss shows up, in the parking lot, and it's fear, or it's something other than excitement and a sense of joy to welcome or see the head of the organization.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
um,
Yeah.
well, well, how do you balance sort of the organizational needs with individual development? Especially when the goals might not align perfectly. Rarely do
Yeah.
they, I'm sure.
I think we're always looking for opportunities, like educational opportunities that are like incremental along the way. Um, and also so that when there is something like big that is, I'm reflecting on recently over the last year, we opened a new clinic, and
Hmm.
there were these things that people were doing in the background, and then we were fast forward into this new situation with a lot of work, and we were able to pull people in because there had been they kind of spent time doing the background work, if that makes sense. So not all of our work is uphill all the time. Sometimes we have these times where there's not so much going on. And how do we continue to grow people during that time so that when these opportunities come, we've got people who are ready and can take on responsibilities and that. So I'm not sure if that fully
Yeah.
answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because I would imagine the scenario I was thinking about is where, like, a person that you would want to move into a very specific role is because of their talent is just not something that is available at the organization. Do
Yeah.
do you manufacture some new role because that's the only way you can keep the person? Do you ask for their patience? Do you help them
Yeah.
find another
Yeah.
organization? Like it's just the alignment is so hard
Yeah.
because especially knowing how there's a lack of professional patience in the world these days. It's like I want this promotion, I want this opportunity, I feel ready. If you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to go somewhere else. Like
Yeah,
that's a lack of alignment, right? But it happens
yeah.
so frequently.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've had both. I've had these scenarios happen here within the last 6 months. So, in one of the situations, we actually did create something where someone was looking for growth. It was as we talked about it, and it was one of my direct uh, reports who had a staff member who was absolutely ready for an opportunity, and we had a need, and so we actually did create something that
Mhm.
provided that opportunity for growth. And in other scenarios we don't have that. So I just recently had someone who wanted a promotional opportunity that they weren't ready for, and we'd been having those ongoing conversations, and they found a position externally that provided them that opportunity. And the best thing I can do is support that, because they're looking for the growth for our organization and what I was needing in that next role. They
Yeah.
weren't ready for it, and it was primarily around the leadership philosophy. It was somebody who kind of held all their work very close to them. And in a leadership director level, C-suite level, it needs to be about not you doing all of the work. That's what our managers and supervisors are doing and staff,
Right.
but somebody who is helping facilitate. And they just weren't ready for it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, it's so common, and we could talk for days about the challenges of a real strong individual performer moving into a leadership role or a manager role where they're no longer chiefly responsible for production. There might be some of it, but it's the management of other people's production. The
yeah.
managing other individual performers in a way, right? And I could talk for days about the challenges. What we don't talk for days about are the solutions and how to get those strong individual performers prepared to be leaders and have a different approach, a different mentality, a different expectation, all that stuff. So, um,
I it's so funny too because I could understand there are times that being able to coming from operations, it's sometimes nice to go back to the stuff that is just very tasky,
yeah.
and it's
Oh,
it's a
right.
little right. And so it's like it's really easy to like want to like own something like that because you don't have to think about it quite as much,
Maybe something I can control.
yeah, right. Yeah.
What
So
do you
I
mean I have to be at the
understand the philosophy.
mercy of all of these things that are not necessarily under my direct control?
Right, right. So I feel like it's that, it's constantly checking ourselves, to make sure that it's easy for me to do that too. Oh, I can manage that. And it's
Yeah.
like I have people who tell me no, you don't need to manage that. It's fine. So,
Yeah. Good, good, good. Yeah. And that's a trap that the best of us fall into all the time because we'd like to believe, I think, very capable
yeah.
and tolerant of a lot of pain and all of those
Yeah.
kinds of things,
I
right?
think there's too, that balance of like having people understand that you're not so far away from the work that you can't do it yourself.
Good point.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Like it's about being part of the team too, where you want people to know I can do that. I
Yeah.
can be,
Yeah.
I'm here supporting you, but there's a
I could
balance.
I roll up my sleeves.
Right.
I'm not afraid of some hard work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, you believe that developing people is one of the most critical things a leader needs to focus on. Why is that so central to your leadership practice?
Yeah. I think first of all, it makes the job more fun. I do. I think that is we were all provided again some opportunity that got us to the places that we're at. And
Yep.
I want to be that person that somebody reflects back on to be like, Christy helped to open doors. Or not like that, but provided me and helped me prepare to be ready to take on those roles. I feel like that is a legacy that I am really committed to, and so that drives me a lot. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably the best answer I can provide.
No, no, it's so great, and I appreciate the deep understanding that you have that you are the leader you are today because obviously you have God-given talents that helped you get there, but you were the beneficiary of
Yep.
some fortunate circumstances, some good people in your life that helped, and a lot of things that were out of your control. And there's a such a danger in having a leader who thinks that it was just because of me, all the things that
Yeah.
I did. I'm the one that brought myself here. There was no other responsible person or circumstance except for my hard work, my intelligence, my diligence, me, 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 me. And
Yeah.
fortunately, we see less of that in the nonprofit sector, but we see a lot of it in the for-profit world. And it's so nice that we get to work in a sector where there's less of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, the terminology of servant leadership is about helping again, like help people do their best work and again identifying those barriers and creating opportunities for people to grow. I mean, especially like for us, recruitment and retention is critically important. And
Yeah,
so having an engaged workforce who feels like they have opportunities if they want to grow, I think is part of our sustainability plan.
I love
That's
that. Yeah,
we it's part of succession planning, staff development. It's incorporated into our strategic plan. That
yeah,
is a it's part of our philosophy as an organization, and we're all in on it.
yeah. Well, what do you attribute the success of building, that culture? How have you built it? How do you sustain it? Like, how have you created this idea or this practice where professional exploration, growth feedback are the norm rather than the exception?
Yeah, I do think that actually going back to my comment just a moment ago about building it into the strategic plan, having
Okay.
things like
Yeah.
career ladders and what's going to happen someday down the line if I decide to retire, who's going to take my job and how am I preparing our organization for that? And that cascades to, down through our leadership. It's a culture
Yeah.
that we need to have so that we've all been in organizations where a leader leaves and it's like all of a sudden the bottom dropped out. And
100%.
right? And so it's like, but it shouldn't be that way, and it
Mm-mm.
doesn't need to be that way. And in fact, I think our organizations run a lot better when we feel like we can step away and take a vacation, or and that things aren't all gonna, I'm not gonna come back to fires. Like I feel like for sanity, that's something that focusing on this really strengthens us as an organization. And that's why we have it built so intentionally into our strategic plan.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Um, we're, for whatever reason, there's a lot of analogies connected to buses, like sitting in the right seat on the bus, getting run over by the bus. I wonder why buses are so important to professional analogies. But anyway, that's a topic for another podcast.
Right?
Let's wrap up with one final important question, and that is, what impact have you seen on organizational performance, morale, mission alignment when leaders invest seriously in staff development?
Yeah, I do think we've seen a direct result in recruitment and retention.
Okay.
And I do think
Important.
that there are people that we hire that are looking for those opportunities too when they want to grow in an organization. I've enjoyed being able to see people get excited about doing new work and taking
Yeah,
on
right.
additional responsibilities. I love, they kind of light up. You see it in meetings. We have a couple of 3 or 4 new leaders just over the last 3 or 4 months who've taken on these elevated roles. And just to see them, sometimes in front of our board doing a presentation, and it's just like they show up differently. And it's really exciting to see. Um, the other thing is by doing that, it allows us as leaders to be doing that higher level of work where we should be spending more of our time. I think that people management, and there's lots of statistics. I'm not sure which one is exactly correct, but there's lots of statistics on where we as leaders should be spending our time, and the majority is with our team, is working on the people piece. And it's not the sexy stuff all the time, but it's where if we want to see the positive outcomes for our organizations, it's where if we focus on, and I can share firsthand, it's constantly a work in progress, and
Sure.
it really is. But I am fully committed because I've seen, how impactful that focus can be.
Yeah. Well, I know you would say that the greatest asset of the organization are your people,
People,
from top to
absolutely.
bottom, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
if you're going to work on anything as the chief executive and you're committed to this concept that the greatest asset you have are your people, then your chief responsibility should be those same people, right?
Yeah, I oftentimes like to also share, and I genuinely mean this, that of course, our organizations have hierarchy, right? But my role is uniquely different than my HR person's role or our front desk folks or our medical providers or our pharmacists. It I can argue that they're equally, if not times more important than I am. Because if we didn't have those folks doing the work that they are doing, we wouldn't have patients coming into our practice and I wouldn't have my job. So
Mm.
to think of ourselves as a pretty flat organization. I have the privilege of being able to provide direction.
Yeah.
But the more I can support work at all levels, and we all have that mentality, we don't need to be the people who are in the administrative building. We really need to be the people that our staff think of as helping them help our community and help the people that we serve.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. I love that. And that is just such a great place to conclude our conversation. Christy, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your perspective on developing people, supporting staff, and helping individuals thrive in the roles that they're right for, or helping them find the roles that they are right for. Your clarity, compassion, and commitment to growth are powerful examples for leaders across the nonprofit sector. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us. And also make sure, in addition to checking out Lead for Good and liking and subscribing, if you do like this content, take a look at our other two shows, Mastering Fundraising and The Nonprofit Edge. In all of them, we meet with and chat with, discuss conversations and topics with extraordinary leaders in the nonprofit sector. So I invite you to check those out. We appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to having you join us again the next time. See you all soon.
Thank you for joining us for this most recent episode of Lead for Good. Our passion is helping nonprofit leaders reach their full potential as leaders, and we sincerely hope this episode has been edifying for you. Please subscribe to this podcast to not miss any of our Lead for Good conversations. We welcome your feedback, suggestions, and comments via email at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Lead for Good is a production of Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership. Please visit us on the web at www.fulcrumleader.com. Until next time, we wish you all the best and encourage you to always lead for good.